The Montana sun blazed like a ruthless eye in a cloudless sky when Cole Maddox spotted movement at the far edge of his wheat field, a lone figure staggering before collapsing in a swirl of faded fabric and dust. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. For a heartbeat, he thought it might be a wounded animal, or some cruel mirage born of the relentless heat that had gripped the summer of 1876. But as he pushed through the wheat parting like a golden sea, he saw it was a woman. Cole wiped the sweat from his brow and tipped his worn Stetson lower as he quickened his stride. At 32, he was used to the quiet life on his remote ranch 15 miles from Silver Creek, with the closest neighbor 3 miles off. The sight of any stranger set his pulse hammering. When he reached her, she lay face down, dark hair spilling over the baked earth. Her once fine dress was torn and dust-choked from a long and punishing journey. For a breath, he feared she was dead. Ma'am Cole dropped to one knee and gently rolled her over. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing deep brown eyes that struggled to focus. Her lips were cracked from thirst, her skin burning hot. "Water," she whispered, barely a breath. Cole uncorked his canteen and lifted her head with care. "Small sips," he warned. "Too much at once will make you sick." She drank greedily, but obeyed, and after a few moments her gaze steadied with gratitude and bone-deep weariness. "Thank you," she managed. "What's your name? And how'd you come to be way out here? There's nothing for miles." He helped her sit, steadying her when she swayed. "Clara Boone," she said, before pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. "I was on the stage heading to Silver Creek. Men with guns stopped us. A robbery." Cole's jaw tightened. That line of stagecoaches had been ambushed more than once in recent months. "And the others?" he asked. I don't know." Clara's eyes brimmed. "There was shooting. I ran. I've been walking. I don't know how long." Cole glanced at the sun sinking lower. In a few hours, night would swallow the prairie, and she was in no shape to keep moving. "My place is just over that rise," he said, pointing to a small homestead barely visible in the shimmering heat. "Can you walk with help? Or shall I carry you?" "I can walk," she insisted, but when she tried to stand, her legs folded beneath her. Without another word, Cole swept her into his arms, surprised at how light she was beneath the layers of dusty fabric. She didn't protest, which told him more about her exhaustion than words ever could. "I'm Cole Maddox," he said as he started toward the house. "You're safe now, Miss Boone." She didn't answer. When he looked down, she had slipped back into unconsciousness, her head resting against his shoulder. The walk felt longer than usual with her slight weight in his arms. Questions churned in his mind. Who was Clara Boone? What business had drawn her to Silver Creek? And what fate had met the others on that stage? By the time he stepped onto his porch, the sun had dropped low, stretching long shadows across the yard. Buck, his loyal cattle dog, with one blue eye and one brown, bounded forward, barking a sharp challenge. "It's all right, boy," Cole said softly. "She's a guest." He managed to open the door and carried Clara inside, laying her gently on his own bed. It wasn't much, a sturdy wooden frame with a straw mattress and clean linens, but far better than the floor, or the small cot he kept for rare visitors. He dampened a cloth and carefully wiped the dust from her face. In the cabin's steady light, he could see she was striking mid-20s, maybe her features refined and unmistakably city-bred. Her hands, though grimy from travel, bore no calluses, no sign of hard labor. Likely from the east, he thought. He removed her boots, covered her with a light blanket, and set about cooking beans and bacon, knowing she'd need strength when she woke. As the beans simmered in the cast-iron pot, He kept glancing toward the bed, unsettled by how swiftly his quiet day had changed. 11 years of solitude since the war, ever since Shiloh, and the bloody campaigns that followed had led him to this remote life. He made rare trips to town, lived with his livestock and Buck, and found comfort in silence. Yet something about this stranger stirred a feeling he hadn't known in years. A soft moan drew him back. Clara's eyes flicked around the unfamiliar room until they found him. "Where?" She began, her voice steadier now. "My home," Cole said, bringing her a cup of water. "You fainted." "Drink." She eased up, accepted the cup with shaking hands. "How long was I out?" "Not long, maybe half an hour. I'm sorry to trouble you, Mr. Maddox." "Cole," he corrected gently. "And you're no trouble. Couldn't leave you out there?" A faint smile lit her face, softening her worry. "No, I suppose not. Still, I'm grateful. Food's nearly ready," he said, turning back to the stove. "Nothing fancy, but it'll help you get your strength back." Clara looked down at her dusty, torn dress with a faint grimace. "I must look a fright." Cole cleared his throat. "I can heat some water if you'd like to wash up. Got an old shirt you can wear while that dress dries." Her relief was instant. That would be wonderful. While Cole Maddox heated water on the iron stove, Clara Boone finally opened up about the ordeal. The stagecoach, she said, had carried 5 souls herself, an elderly pair bound for their son's homestead in Silver Creek, a businessman from Denver, and a young miner chasing silver dreams. 10 miles past the last way station, 3 masked riders had cut them off. They wanted anything worth coin, Clara explained, as Cole set a steaming bowl of beans before her. When the businessman resisted, they shot him right there. Her voice wavered. The driver tried to bolt. They gunned him down too. In the chaos, I slipped out the far side of the coach and ran through the brush. I kept running as the gunfire followed me. Cole's jaw hardened. "Stage robberies are getting worse. Marshal Hank Rourke can hardly keep up. Do you think the others—" She couldn't finish. "Hard to know," he said honestly. "If they handed over their valuables, maybe the Prairie Vipers spared them. The stage line will miss that coach soon enough. They'll send riders." Clara nodded, but the worry in her eyes stayed put. When she finished eating, Cole guided her to the small washroom off the cabin, leaving her with warm water soap and a clean shirt of his. "I'll be outside with the stock," he said. "Take your time." In the barn, as he pitched hay to Dustfoot and Morning Star and milked the cow Cole mulled whether to ride into town at dawn to warn Marshal Hank Rourke about the holdup and Clara's escape. The errand meant a full day gone, leaving her alone on the ranch, and that didn't sit easy with him. By the time he stepped back inside, Clara sat at the table, her dark hair damp and loose about her shoulders. His shirt draped over her slight frame, making her look even more delicate. Her travel dress and underthings hung drying on a line across the corner. "I feel human again," she said with a faint smile. "Glad to hear it," Cole replied, suddenly self-conscious in his own home. "You take the bed tonight. I'll set up on the cot." "I couldn't possibly." "You need the rest more than I do," he cut in. "I've slept in worse spots." As darkness settled outside, Cole lit the oil lamps and stoked the stove against the high country chill. They shared a quiet evening, the fire's crackle their only company. "You have kin in Silver Creek?" Cole asked at last. A shadow crossed her face. "No, I was heading there for a new start." Something in her tone hinted at deeper troubles, but he let it be. "Everyone out here carried ghosts of their own. Silver Creek's a decent town," he offered, booming with the silver strike, but the folks are mostly good. "And you?" she asked. "How long have you lived out here? 11 years. "Came west after the war." Recognition lit her eyes. "You fought in the war between the state's Union Army," he said quietly. "Tennessee and Georgia mostly." "My brother fought too." she whispered. He never made it home. I'm sorry, Cole said with plain sincerity. Many didn't. Silence fell, but it was the kind that spoke of shared loss rather than emptiness. Before long, weariness claimed her. Cole showed her to the bed and rolled out his cot near the door. If you need anything in the night, don't hesitate to wake me, he said. Thank you, Cole, she murmured as her eyes closed. Long after her breathing softened into steady sleep, he lay awake, listening to the familiar night sounds of the ranch, mingled with the rare presence of another soul under his roof. Oddly, it felt right, something he hadn't realized he'd been missing until now. Morning broke, bright and clear sunlight spilling through the small windows. Cole, an early riser, was already at the stove when Clara stirred. She sat up momentarily lost, then remembered. Good morning, she said, her voice husky with sleep. Morning, he replied, a small smile touching his normally quiet face. Hope you're hungry, flapjacks and bacon. Running a hand through her tangled hair, she winced. I must look a fright. You look just fine, he said, turning back to his cooking before the warmth in his cheeks betrayed him. After a hearty breakfast, Clara insisted on helping with the dishes despite his protests. Working side by side, she brought a soft, domestic rhythm to the bachelor cabin. What's your plan for today? She asked. Need to ride into Silver Creek, Cole said. Tell Marshal Rourke about the stagecoach ambush. See if there's news of the others. Her hands stilled in the wash basin. I see. You're welcome to stay here, he added quickly. It's a full day there and back. No reason for you to make the trip in your condition. Relief softened her face. Thank you. I don't think I could face another long ride so soon. I'll leave Buck with you, Cole said of his steadfast dog. He's good company, and he'll sound the alarm if anyone shows up. At the mention of strangers, a flash of unease crossed Clara's features, sharp enough for Cole to notice. Is there someone in particular you're afraid might come looking? He asked gently. Clara dried her hands on a towel, eyes fixed on the floor, the question hanging heavy between them. It's a long story, Clara Boone said at last, her voice low with something heavier than fatigue. And not one I'm proud of. Cole Maddox leaned against the counter, giving her room yet showing he'd listen when she was ready. We all have trails behind us we'd rather not map, he said quietly. Searching his face for judgment, and finding none, Clara began. I was engaged to a man named Rhett Blackwood. His father owns a powerful bank back in Chicago. At first, Rhett seemed charming, everything a father like mine would want for his daughter. But once the engagement was public, his true nature came clear. He grew controlling, possessive. When I spoke of doubts, he turned angry, frighteningly so. She twisted the dish towel knuckles white. My father, Elias Boone, refused to break the match. The Blackwood name meant too much to his business. So I ran. I sold most of the jewelry my mother, Della Boone, left me and bought a ticket west. I thought if I put enough miles behind me, they'd never find me. And now you fear Rhett will hunt you down, Cole said, his voice even. Clara nodded. He's proud, and public disgrace doesn't sit well with a man like him. He has money to send searchers. Cole absorbed her words. It explained the watchfulness in her eyes, the way she skirted town. Silver Creek's small, he warned. If someone comes asking after a woman of your description, folks will talk. I know, she whispered. I'd hoped to find work there, maybe teaching or in a shop. Something respectable, but unnoticed. Cole pictured the growing town with its miners, merchants, and a handful of polished families. A woman as educated and refined as you would still stand out. He hesitated, then said, There's another way. You could stay here a while until you're sure no one's on your trail. Surprise widened her eyes. Here I can't impose like that. It's a working ranch, he replied with a shrug, though his heart thudded faster. Always more chores than hands. You'd be helping, not imposing. And no one would think to look for a Chicago banker's bride-to-be on a remote spread like this. She studied him, still doubtful. You hardly know me. Why do this for a stranger? Something about her presence had already filled an emptiness he hadn't known was there. Out here folks help each other, he said simply. It's how we stay alive. A slow smile softened her face. Then I accept Mr. Maddox. Thank you. Cole, he corrected with a faint grin. Cole, she repeated, and something in the way she spoke his name tightened his chest. Before heading to town, he walked her around the ranch, the chicken coop where she could gather eggs, the vegetable garden needing weeding, the spring house that kept milk and butter cool. Clara listened closely, quick to grasp every detail despite her city upbringing. I'll be gone till after dark, he told her as he saddled Dustfoot, his sturdy bay gelding. Buck will stay with you. There's a rifle above the door, if need be, though I'm not expecting trouble. Clara nodded, standing in the yard with arms folded against the breeze, looking both determined and fragile in her freshly dried dress. Be careful, she said. Always a mate, Cole replied, tipping his hat. He glanced back once as he rode off the image of her standing with Buck faithfully at her side, staying with him all the way to Silver Creek. The town had swelled since his last visit. New buildings framed the main street, the ring of hammers and saws proof of a silver boom that turned a quiet settlement into a frontier hub. Cole tied Dustfoot outside Marshal Hank Rourke's office and stepped inside. Cole Maddox Rourke said with a grin of surprise. Twice in one season, that's near a record. Cole managed a thin smile. Everyone knew how rarely he left his land. Got something you should hear, Hank, he said, taking a seat. A woman, Clara Boone, showed up at my place yesterday. Says the stagecoach she rode was held up north of here. She escaped the holdup on foot. Rourke's expression hardened. We got word of that yesterday. Stage company sent riders when the coach failed to show. Found it about 12 miles north of town. Cole's chest tightened. And the passengers? The driver and one passenger are dead, the marshal said grimly. The rest were stripped of everything but left alive. They're resting at Doc Levi Grant's place. Relief flickered across Cole's face. At least Clara wouldn't bear the weight of more deaths. She's staying with you? Rourke asked. For now, Cole answered. She walked miles under that sun after escaping. She's welcome to come in and give a statement when she's able, the marshal said. Might help us track these prairie vipers. That's the third stage robbery in 2 months. I'll let her know, Cole promised. Though Cole Maddox felt a pinch of unease at the thought of taking Clara Boone into Silver Creek where someone might spot her if they were hunting, he finished his business in town. After leaving Marshal Hank Rourke's office, he stocked up at Zeke Porter's general store, spoke with the blacksmith about shoes for Dustfoot and the other stock, and stopped at the post office where Cody Hart handed over the sparse mail. All the while, Cole kept an ear out for any word of strangers asking after a dark-haired woman with polished speech. Nothing suspicious reached him. His last stop was the Silverado Saloon, not for whiskey, but for talk. The place was the nerve center of local gossip, and its bartender, Jed Crow, knew more than most lawmen. Maddox, Jed greeted, eyebrows raised. Twice in 1 month? That's near scandalous for you. Just passing through, Cole said. Ordering a beer he didn't much want, just something to keep him at the counter. Town's growing fast. Jed went on, running a rag over the bar's scarred plank. Silver Strike brings every kind good and bad. He lowered his voice. Heard about that stagecoach ambush? Cole nodded. Marshall filled me in. Bad business, Jed said, but folks are buzzing more about a gent who was in here yesterday dressed sharp, asking after a woman. Dark hair, educated way of talking, claimed she was his sister who'd run off from Chicago. Left a reward for any lead. Cole's hand tightened on the glass. Still around, he asked, keeping his tone easy. Nope. Rode out this morning. Said he's checking settlements all over the territory. Jed studied him. Why? You know something about this runaway Cole? Forced a small shrug and drained the beer in a single swallow. Just curious. Jed gave a short laugh. Never a dull spell in Silver Creek these days. Riding home in the deepening dusk, Cole's mind worked hard. The timing was too neat. Whoever that well-dressed stranger was, he had to be tied to Rhett Blackwood, sent to track Clara. He'd be back, and next time with sharper questions. As Cole crested the final rise, the warm glow of his cabin lights pulled him faster. The scent of cooking rich and savory met him before he reached the yard. Buck bounded out tail high, barking a hearty welcome. The door swung open, spilling lamplight across the dark yard. Clara stood framed in the glow, her hair neatly pulled back, wearing one of Cole's old shirts belted over her skirt like an apron. "You're back," she said, relief softening her voice. "Told you I would be," he answered, swinging down and leading Dustfoot to the barn. "Something smells wonderful," he called as he loosened the cinch. "Rabbit stew," she replied, smiling. "Buck caught a rabbit near the garden. I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty." Cole smiled to himself as he rubbed Dustfoot down and filled the feed box. In just a single day, Clara had begun to make the place her own, and the thought warmed him more than he cared to admit. Inside the table stood neatly set. The stew simmered in his old iron pot. Fresh biscuits cooled on a plate, and every corner of the cabin shone as if newly scrubbed. "You've been busy," he said, hanging his hat on the peg. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly shy. "I wanted to thank you for your kindness. I hope I didn't overstep." "Not at all," Cole said quickly. "The place hasn't looked this good in years." They ate together at the small table. While he told her what he had learned, the other passengers were alive. Marshal Rourke wanted her statement when she felt ready, and last and most reluctantly about the stranger who had been asking questions. Color drained from Clara's face. "It's starting already," she whispered. "I thought we'd have more time." "He's gone for now," Cole said steadily. "But he'll likely return. We should be ready." She met his eyes, troubled. I offered you shelter," Cole said firmly. "I don't make offers lightly." Gratitude and something warmer softened her expression. "Thank you," she said simply. That night, as they sat near the crackling fire, Cole spoke more freely than he had in years. He told her of his boyhood in Pennsylvania, of battles fought and nightmares that still came, and how he'd come west seeking peace and built this ranch from bare land. Clara shared memories of her Chicago childhood, her love of books, and her dream of shaping a life on her own terms, not under a father's or husband's rule. "Is that why you chose to stay here?" Cole asked at last, watching the firelight flicker across her thoughtful face. "Because I left the decision to you." Partly, she admitted, a faint smile playing at her lips. But also Clara Boone added softly, "Because when you found me in that wheat field, you didn't just hand me water. You gave me back my dignity. You treated me like a person, not a burden to be moved along or a problem to be solved." Her words stirred something deep in Cole Maddox's chest, a feeling he'd thought long buried under years of hard work and deliberate solitude. "It's getting late," he said at last, rising from his chair to break the spell before it overtook him. "We both ought to rest." As on previous nights, Cole took the narrow cot and gave Clara the bed. But as he lay in the darkness, listening to her gentle breathing across the room, he knew something inside his ordered life had shifted. Whether he welcomed that change or feared it, he couldn't yet tell, only that nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The days that followed slid into an easy rhythm. Cole showed Clara the patterns of ranch life, how to milk the cow, tend the vegetable garden, and care for the hens. Clara proved quick to learn, tackling each task with determination that belied her city upbringing. Evenings found them side by side, sometimes on the porch, watching the big Montana sky fade to silver, sometimes by the hearth when weather turned cool. Clara brought new flavor to his simple suppers using wild herbs she'd discovered near the spring house. And in those quiet hours, she sometimes recited poetry from memory verses that carried Cole far beyond the rugged hills of the territory. He in turn shared his own deep love for the land and the unspoken music of a life lived close to nature. A week passed, then another with no word of trouble from Silver Creek, and no mention of Clara leaving to find work. Without discussion, they simply allowed her stay to stretch on, neither wishing to disturb the companionship growing between them. One warm July afternoon, Cole was mending fence on the far edge of his spread when he spotted Clara crossing the meadow with Buck trotting faithfully at her side. She carried a basket wrapped in a clean cloth sunlight, sparking on her dark hair, now braided and pinned up neatly. The summer had kissed her skin with color and given her stride a new confidence. "Thought you might be hungry," she called. Cole smiled, realizing he'd worked straight through the noon hour. "You read my mind," he said. They settled under a wide cottonwood and unpacked a simple picnic bread, cheese-cold chicken left from supper, and a jar of fresh lemonade. "I've been thinking," Clara said, as they ate, about how I can help more around here. "You already do more than your share," he replied, surprised. "Housework, yes," she countered. "But you carry the real ranch work alone. It doesn't have to stay that way." "That's how it's always been," he said with a shrug. "It doesn't have to be," she insisted. "I want to learn to ride to help with the cattle real ranch chores." Cole studied her determined eyes. The thought of Clara out on the range galloping after strays or checking fence lines was both appealing and worrisome. "Ranching's risky," he said at last. "And you've never ridden." "Then teach me," she answered simply. "You've said yourself I'm a quick learner." He sensed this was about more than helping with chores. Clara was claiming the freedom she'd crossed half a continent to find the right to test her own limits without anyone dictating what was proper. "All right," he said finally. "We'll start tomorrow with Morningstar. She's older and gentle." Clara's smile lit her whole face, and Cole felt a warmth in his chest that matched hers. The next morning he led Morningstar, the calm brown mare, with a white blaze into the corral. Clara waited eagerly in a split skirt she had sewn from one of her dresses so she could ride astride. "First rule of horsemanship," Cole said, handing her a curry comb, "is to care for your horse before and after you ride. Builds trust." He showed her how to brush Morningstar's coat, check her hooves, and cinch the saddle. Clara listened intently, asking sharp questions, and following each step with care. When it came time to mount, Cole stood at the mare's head, steadying the bridle. "Left foot in the stirrup. Grab the horn and swing your right leg over." Clara hesitated only a heartbeat before obeying. Her first try was awkward, but she settled into the saddle without mishap. Now what she asked, equal parts nervous and thrilled. "Now you guide her," Cole explained. "Use your legs, the reins your balance. Horses feel your courage or your fear." For an hour, he walked Morningstar around the corral with Clara aboard, teaching the language of pressure and movement. By the end, she was steering the mare in gentle circles and halts, though she still looked unsure without his steady hand. "You did well for a first ride," he said, helping her down. Clara winced, rubbing her thighs. "I'll be sore tomorrow." "That's proof you're learning," Cole said with a grin. "We'll practice again if you're willing." She was, and by the week's end she could guide Morningstar freely inside the corral, confidence growing with every lesson. "When can we ride beyond the corral?" she asked eagerly after the 7th session. "Soon," Cole promised. "Maybe this weekend we'll head down to the creek. It's about a mile from here." "Smooth, easy ground," Cole Maddox said. The thought of that first real ride lit Clara Boone's face with excitement, and she threw herself into every remaining lesson with fresh resolve. Saturday morning dawned bright and calm. Cole saddled Dustfoot while Clara readied Morning Star. A few minutes later, they were riding side by side toward the little creek that cut across the east edge of his land. The day couldn't have been better. Blue skies, a mild breeze carrying the scent of late summer grass. Cole kept an eye on Clara, ready to step in if Morning Star gave her trouble. But there was no need. Clara sat straight and sure, guiding the mare with growing ease, her expression radiant with pure delight. "This is freedom," she said as they crossed a meadow scattered with wildflowers. "I never truly understood what folks meant when they spoke of the freedom of the West. Now, I feel it." Cole nodded, understanding perfectly. "It's the reason I came here. After the war, I couldn't stand fences made of city streets and other people's plans. I needed big sky and open land." By mid-morning, they reached the creek and dismounted in the shade, where the water ran clear over smooth stones. While the horses drank downstream, they sat together on the grassy bank, the quiet broken only by the soft rush of water. "I've been thinking," Clara said, drawing idle shapes in the soil with a twig. "Thinking about autumn." A sudden tightness gripped Cole's chest. "What about it?" "Winter follows," she said, eyes lowered. "Snow, isolation. It must be hard facing those months alone." "I've managed for 11 years, Cole answered. But even as he spoke, he knew the thought of returning to solitude after these weeks with her filled him with a new kind of dread. "Yes," but Clara hesitated, then looked up, her voice steady. "What if I stayed? Through the winter, I mean." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither had dared name. Cole had grown used to her presence, the hum of her voice in the evenings, the way she moved through the cabin like she belonged there. The idea of her leaving gnawed at him more with every day. "It isn't an easy life," he said carefully. "Winters here are rough. Roads to town can stay blocked for weeks. It'd be just the two of us in that little cabin." "I know," she replied softly. "I've thought about it. But the alternative is Silver Creek always glancing over my shoulder, wondering if Rhett Blackwood's men have found me." Cole searched her face. Beneath the fear, he saw something that echoed his own unspoken feeling. "You'd be welcome," he said at last. "For as long as you want." A smile, bright as midsummer sun, spread across her face. "Thank you, Cole." Riding home side by side across rolling grass, her laughter carrying on the breeze, Cole felt his once cherished solitude losing its pull. That evening, with the sky aflame in gold and crimson, Cole finally asked the question that had weighed on him all afternoon. "Clara," he began, voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "when you said you wanted to stay through the winter, was it only because you fear being found?" She turned toward him, eyes reflecting the fading light. "No," she said simply. "That's not the only reason." "What else then?" he pressed. Clara's gaze dropped to her folded hands. "I've come to care for this place," she said softly. "For the life here. And for you, Cole." The quiet confession sent a rush of warmth through his chest. In these weeks, he had admired her grit, her gentleness, her unshakable spirit. But he had barely let himself hope she might feel the same. "I care for you too," he said, the words far too small for the feeling inside. "More than I ever thought I could again." A soft smile curved her lips. "Is that so surprising?" "For me, yes," he admitted. "After the war, I thought that part of me was gone, buried at Shiloh and Chickamauga with too many friends." Clara reached over, covering his hand where it rested on the porch rail. "Nothing truly good ever dies," she said gently. "It only waits for the right season to bloom again." He turned his palm beneath hers, their fingers twining naturally. They stayed like that, as twilight deepened, bound by an unspoken promise neither of them had expected, but both treasured. August swept by in a blur of shared chores and quiet, deepening closeness. Clara's riding sharpened until Cole trusted her to help drive cattle and ride the fence lines. Together they prepared for winter, stacking firewood and checking every inch of the cabin for leaks. By early September, a crispness touched the morning air. Cole increased his trips into Silver Creek for supplies and repairs. Clara ran the ranch alone during these absences, proving herself capable and steady. On one such trip, Cole sensed a shift in town. The first rush of the silver boom had calmed into steady growth. Canvas tents gave way to sturdy buildings, and the streets carried a quieter, more permanent hum. While loading flour outside Zeke Porter's store, he saw Marshal Hank Rourke approach with a serious look. Cole the lawman greeted, lowering his voice. "Got a minute?" Cole set down the sack. "Sure. What's on your mind? That woman staying with you, Clara." "Boone, did she tell you why she was headed for Silver Creek?" Cole felt a prick of unease. Said she was after a fresh start. "Why, a well-dressed man rode through yesterday," Hank said. "Claims he represents a banking family out of Chicago, looking for a woman who fits her description." Marshal Hank Rourke studied Cole Maddox's face for a long moment. "She run out on an engagement, took some valuable jewelry. They're calling it theft." Cole forced his expression to stay calm. "That's so." Rourke slid a folded paper across. "He left these around town." Cole opened it. A wanted notice offered a hefty reward for information on Clara Boone, dark hair, about 25 Refined Manor. It claimed she had stolen family heirlooms and fled a binding engagement contract. "Man seemed mighty set on finding her," Rourke added. "Said to wire him in Denver if anyone hears anything." Cole folded the notice and slipped it into his pocket. "Thanks for letting me know, Hank. I'm not prying into what's between you and the lady," the marshal said carefully. "Just figured you ought to be aware. Banking families like that have reach even out here." "I understand," Cole answered grimly. "One more thing," Rourke said, as Cole turned to leave. "Stage lines hired extra guards after those holdups. Caught one of the Prairie Vipers last week. He talked hoping to save his neck, said they'd been tipped off from Denver, with passenger lists targeting folks carrying jewelry or cash." Cole's stomach tightened. "You think the ambush Clara escaped was planned? Want prove it," Rourke said. "But if someone wanted a woman to vanish, a staged robbery where she might be presumed dead would cover the tracks." The ride home felt endless. The wanted poster in his pocket burned like a brand. If Rhett Blackwood had arranged the robbery, it meant he was far more ruthless and better connected than they'd guessed. The accusations, theft, and breach of contract were designed to brand Clara a criminal instead of a victim. When Cole reached the ranch, he found Clara in the garden, wide-brimmed hat shading her face as she gathered the last of the summer vegetables. The sight of her humming softly, hands in the earth, filled him with fierce protectiveness. "You're back earlier than I expected," she said, smiling until she saw his face. "What's wrong?" Cole dismounted and pulled the folded notice from his pocket. "Marshal Rourke gave me this. They're posted all over town." Clara's color drained as she read the paper, shaking in her hands. "He's calling me a thief," she whispered. "Those jewels were my mother Della Boone's left to me. He knows that." "There's more," Cole said, and told her what Hank had shared about the robberies being targeted. When he finished, Clara sat heavily on the garden bench, the poster crumpled in her fist. "He would do that," she said hollowly. "Arrange a robbery, maybe even killings, just to hide my disappearance." Cole sat beside her and took her cold hands in his. She raised her eyes, fear and despair stark in their depths. "I won't let him harm you," Cole said, his voice iron. "But we need to plan. These notices change things. Someone could connect you to me soon. "What can we do?" she asked. "If I run, he'll find me. If I stay, I endanger you." Cole had weighed every option on the ride home. Flee farther west, maybe north into wilder country. Try to gather proof of Rhett's crimes. Each path bristled with risk. Finally, he spoke the thought he'd turned over again and again. "There's another way," he said slowly. "One that would give you legal protection." Clara's brows lifted. "Marriage?" Cole said at last. "As my wife, you'd be under my legal name and protection. That engagement contract would be void, and no man could claim you stole what would legally belong to both of us." Clara's eyes widened. "Cole, are you proposing?" He hadn't planned it like this, meant as a safeguard more than a vow. But now that the words were out, he knew it was exactly what he wanted. "Not how I imagined asking," he said with a rueful smile. "But yes, not just to shield you, because these months with you have been the best of my life. Because I love you, Clara Boone, and I want a life with you, if you'll have me." Tears welled, but her smile shone through them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Cole. Not for protection alone, but because I love you too." He drew her into his arms, relief and joy surging through him. When their lips met, it sealed everything that had grown between them since that first day in the wheat field. A promise of a future neither had dared dream until they found each other. 2 days later, Cole Maddox and Clara Boone stood before Pastor Owen Frost, the traveling circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Silver Creek. The ceremony was plain and heartfelt in the small clapboard church on the town's edge, with Marshal Hank Rourke and his wife as the only witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, freshly pressed, a handful of wildflowers from the meadow serving as her bouquet. Cole had shaved clean and put on the one good suit he kept for rare occasions. Pastor Frost's words were traditional, speaking of honor, steadfast love, and protection in sickness and health. When Cole slipped a simple gold band bought with savings meant for a new plow onto Clara's finger, he felt every mile of his past had led to this moment, the war, the lonely years, the wood-empty prairies, all bringing him to her. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said, and Cole kissed his bride with a tenderness that belied the urgency of their sudden wedding. They marked the day with a modest meal at the hotel dining room before heading home at sunset, man and wife, returning to the ranch that was now their shared world. As dusk settled, Cole slowed Dustfoot and nodded toward the cabin. Clara reined Morningstar beside him, puzzled. "What is it tradition?" he said, swinging down and coming to her side. "A husband's supposed to carry his bride across the threshold." A delighted laugh escaped her as she let him lift her down. Cole gathered her easily into his arms, her weight familiar from months of closeness, yet thrillingly new in this moment. "Mrs. Maddox," he teased, testing the name now hers. "Mr. Maddox," she answered, smiling, as her arms slipped around his neck. Cole pushed open the cabin door without setting her down and stepped inside. Only when he placed her gently on her feet did they both seem to grasp the depth of what had just begun their first true privacy as man and wife. A soft blush colored Clara's cheeks, but no fear showed as she touched his face. "I never thought I'd marry for love," she whispered. "It always felt like a dream too far." "I never thought I'd marry at all," Cole admitted, brushing a kiss across her palm. "After the war, I couldn't imagine sharing my darkness with anyone." And now she asked, "Now I can't imagine not sharing everything with you, the shadows and the light." Their kiss deepened, unbound by doubt or hesitation. As night wrapped the cabin, they discovered each other anew, not as host and guest, but as husband and wife, joined by love as much as by the vows spoken that morning. The weeks that followed brought quiet adjustment and a stronger bond. Their daily routines, caring for stock, tending garden, preparing meals, gained new warmth and permanence. Cole found himself smiling more the old war-haunted weight, lifting bit by bit. Clara, in turn, blossomed in the security of their marriage. She started a flock of chickens from chicks bought in town, planted a fresh herb garden, and laid plans to enlarge the vegetable patch come spring. Yet the shadow of Rhett Blackwood's search lingered. On his monthly rides into Silver Creek, Cole heard of a well-dressed stranger still making inquiries across the territory, though he hadn't come back to town. The wanted posters remained, but Marshal Rourke had quietly removed those within Silver Creek after their wedding. As autumn advanced and snow dusted the far peaks, Cole and Clara readied themselves for the long Montana winter. They canned fruits and vegetables, smoked meat split and stacked firewood, and checked every inch of the cabin for leaks. "It's shaping up to be a hard winter," Cole remarked one evening as he cleaned his rifle, and Clara sat knitting by the fire. "Corn husks are thick rabbits, wear heavy coats, and the squirrels are hoarding like misers." Clara looked up, her eyes calm. "Are you worried? In past years, I only thought about supplies and keeping stock alive," he said. "This year, I think more about keeping you safe and comfortable." "I'm not afraid of the quiet months," she assured him, setting her knitting aside and settling next to him on the hearthrug. "Not with you here." Cole slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Still, we should make one more trip to town before the real storms hit, pick up anything we might still need." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Perhaps I should go with you this time." It would be her first visit to Silver Creek since the wedding, and Cole understood her caution. Even with marriage giving her legal protection, the chance of crossing paths with someone tied to Rhett Blackwood remained. "Might be good for folks to meet Mrs. Cole Maddox," he said with care. "Settle any questions once and for all." The next morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for their ride into town together. Clara Boone wore her warmest wool dress and a heavy shawl, her wedding band gleaming on her gloved hand. Cole Maddox noticed the tension in her shoulders as they loaded the wagon, but said nothing, knowing this trip to Silver Creek was a quiet test, a way for her to reclaim freedom from old fears. The town bustled with pre-winter chores when they arrived. People hurried to lay in supplies before the deep snows came. As Cole and Clara walked the main street toward Zeke Porter's general store, they drew curious but friendly glances. Inside, Zeke greeted them with an easy grin. "Maddox. Good to see you. And this must be the new Mrs. Maddox I've been hearing about." Clara offered her hand with steady grace. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Porter. I've enjoyed the fine goods from your store these past months." As they filled their list extra coffee sugar flour lamp oil ammunition, Clara relaxed, exchanging cheerful words with Zeke and other customers. No one mentioned the old wanted notices or probed her past. Their final stop was the post office, where Cole checked for the occasional letter from his sister, May Rourke, back in Pennsylvania. Cody Hart, the postmaster, handed him an unfamiliar envelope. "Came in yesterday," Cody said. "Addressed to Mr. Cole Maddox Rancher outside Silver Creek. Figured it was for you, no other Maddox ranching around here." Cole frowned at the Chicago postmark and lack of a return name. Clara caught the change in his face, a flicker of worry passing over her own. They waited until they were alone in the wagon heading home before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of fine stationery, the handwriting elegant and deliberate. "Mr. Maddox, certain allegations concerning Miss Clara Boone, now Mrs. Cole Maddox, are without foundation. The jewelry in question is her rightful inheritance. All claims are withdrawn. The engagement contract between Miss Boone and Mr. Rhett Blackwood is formally dissolved as the Blackwood family wishes to avoid any inquiry that might expose sensitive business matters. Mrs. Maddox is free of every obligation and accusation. This matter is closed. Respectfully, Grant Blackwood Cole read it twice, then handed it to Clara. She scanned the page with trembling fingers. "Grant Blackwood," she murmured. "Rhett's uncle. He's a senior partner in the family bank, but he and Rhett have always been at odds. I'm astonished he'd step in like this." "Sounds like your former fiancé overreached," Cole said. "Maybe the family decided he'd become a liability." "You think it's genuine that it's really over?" she asked. "I do," he said at last. "A man like Grant Blackwood wouldn't commit to words like these if he didn't mean them." Relief flooded Clara's face, brightening into a joy that made her eyes shine. "Free," she whispered, a breathless mix of laugh and sob. "Truly free." Cole squeezed her hand. "You've been free since the day you left Chicago. This just proves what we always knew: you did nothing wrong." They rode on in thoughtful silence, each absorbing how this letter swept away the shadow that had hung over them since the day he'd found her in his wheat field. "What shall we do with this new freedom?" Clara asked, at last her voice lighter than Cole had ever heard it. "Anything we want," he said simply, "so long as we do it together." The first full winter of their marriage arrived hard and fast. A heavy storm blanketed the prairie in white, cutting off the road to town until spring. Yet Cole and Clara welcomed the quiet. Their cabin stood snug and well-supplied livestock safe in the barn. Evenings were filled with books, old favorites Cole had gathered over the years, and a few new volumes Clara had bought on their last trip. As Christmas neared, Clara brought festive touches to their remote home pine boughs and red berries over the mantel, small handmade gifts, and special treats from their stores. On Christmas Eve, they exchanged presents: a hand-carved jewelry box from Cole for her cherished pieces, and a hand-knitted scarf from Clara to keep him warm on winter rides. "I have another gift," she said softly, as they sat before the crackling fire. "One I couldn't wrap." Cole looked at her in gentle surprise. "We're going to have a child," she said, eyes bright with joy and a touch of awe. "Early summer, I think." For a moment he could only stare awash in wonder. Then the truth settled over him like sunrise. "A child," he repeated, laying a careful hand on her still flat belly. "Our child." Clara covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "More than I can ever say," he answered, voice thick with gratitude. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Through winter's hush and into the first green of spring, Cole watched in awe as Clara's body changed, nurturing the life they had created, proof of a love that had taken root and now blossomed beneath the endless Montana sky. He insisted that Clara Boone rest as much as possible, quietly taking on extra chores himself. And when the trail opened in late spring, hiring Luke Nash, a sturdy local boy, to help with the heaviest work. Then, on a warm June morning, with wildflowers painting the meadows and new calves kicking up their heels in the pasture, Clara's labor began. The midwife from Silver Creek, who had wisely stayed the week in expectation, calmly directed Cole Maddox to heat water and ready fresh linens while she tended to Clara. The hours that followed were the longest of Cole's life. Banished from the bedroom, he paced the main room, starting at every sound of pain from beyond the closed door. Buck trailed him anxiously, sensing his unease, but not its cause. At last, as the afternoon light softened toward evening, a new sound filled the cabin, the strong, sure cry of a newborn. Cole froze mid-stride, heart hammering. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened, and the midwife stepped out, tired but smiling. "You have a daughter, Mr. Maddox," she announced. A healthy, beautiful girl. Cole entered on unsteady legs to find Clara propped against pillows, her face luminous despite exhaustion, a tiny bundle in her arms. "Come meet your daughter," she whispered. He approached almost reverently and looked down at the small face nestled against Clara's breast. The baby's dark, downy hair matched her mother's, and when her eyes flickered open, he caught a flash of deep blue that might one day mirror his own. "She's perfect," he breathed awash in a love so fierce and grateful he could barely name it. "What shall we call her?" Clara asked softly. June Cole said after a long, full moment, "She's the hope I never dared dream of until you." June Maddox. Clara repeated, tasting the name with a smile. "It's perfect." As summer eased into autumn, and then to winter, their lives reshaped themselves around little June's needs and bright milestones. The cabin that had once felt more than enough for a lone rancher now seemed snug with 3 prompting Cole to draw plans for a spring addition. One snowy December evening, with June sleeping soundly in the cedar cradle Cole had built by hand, he and Clara sat before the crackling fire. Her head rested on his shoulder as they savored the rare quiet. "You ever think about that day?" Clara asked softly. "When you found me in your field," Cole smiled, tightening his arm around her. Often he admitted, "It was the luckiest day of my life, though I sure didn't know it then." "Mine too," she murmured. "I thought I was running from something, but I was really running toward everything I ever wanted." Outside, snow fell in perfect silence. Inside, the fire cast a golden glow over the home they had built together. Cole Maddox, once a war-haunted loner, looked at his wife and their sleeping child and knew without question that he had found where he belonged. "I love you, Clara Maddox," he said, the simple words carrying the full weight of their journey. "And I love you," she replied, tilting her face up for a kiss that promised every bright year ahead, years neither of them could have imagined back when a lost woman stumbled into a Montana wheat field and a cowboy offered water that turned into forever. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.